Welcome to Paranoia Monomer, a series of meetings created by Nico Thompson, my human clone. Throughout this series, and while touching on passages from his eponymous book, we will explore different current and ancient themes, thus paying homage to the lost art of conversation. In this episode, Nicolás Briff is a geologist, educator, consultant, and ontological coach. A true warrior in the trenches of knowledge, Nico has just returned from Israel, where he lived and worked, an experience he shared here with first-hand testimonies. Nicolás Briff, our guest today. I will tell you a little bit about him later, so I don't bore you in the intro. Tell me how you are.
Well, thank you first for being here.
We drink, mate, you tell me.
Come on, let's get started with this.
Yes, sir.
How am I? It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to be very precise with my words to describe what I feel, right? I am happy. I am happy to be here. I am very happy. I am very content. I am somehow surprised by everything I have encountered, by everything I am finding. Everything we have here is very professional, right? You see, yes, no. I came in without expectations, but they were exceeded anyway. Good. Well, I'm really looking forward to chatting, playing, and seeing what happens today here in this conversation. Well, we have the book here. Right. It's a bit of the trigger for a whole bunch of topics.
Exactly.
So let's see.
It's an experiment. It's an experiment for me. It's an experiment for both of us. I also know that it's your first experience in podcasting. Nico is a geologist. I always start there. Nico is a scientist. He is a certified geologist. He is also a teacher, an ontological coach, and a consultant. We have worked together in past lives and have become very good friends. I want to start, Nico. I have already mentioned it to you because this is the first time I am seeing my dear friend Takeo in person after more than a year. So, Nico, what happened last year? 1 week, 2 weeks before the chaos, you moved to Israel, to a city within the territory of Israel. You left with your girlfriend. And you left everything behind here. They packed up the whole backpack to go there and try their luck, generating a hole. Well, you can correct me later. They moved to Israel just minutes before the chaos started with Hamas and all that mess. And a month ago I found out that you've been back here for 2 or 3 months, so it's still fresh. Sorry, you've gone through such an experience that, of course, is still very relevant today. It's hotter than ever. Let's say that. Well, Ukraine and Israel are the two centers of conflict. There are others, but at least tell us a bit about that experience. What I want you to share with us is perhaps to take us through. How did you experience it as an Argentine, as an entrepreneur? Because in addition, in the context, you were starting a new life in a situation that turned into a warlike one and so on. I'll keep quiet and I'll listen to you.
Well, thank you for bringing it up because I love starting here. It's a way to introduce myself. Yes, as you said, more than a year ago, on April 20th, to be precise, last year, my partner and I went to Israel. Well, with this proposal we made to venture out, to try something new, a new lifestyle, perhaps a little tired of. I don't know if, yes, we were a bit tired and also looking to discover something different. We felt that being here, we already knew, we understood where things could go. We said, well, let's take that license. We have the right age, we don't have children. It's the moment. We saw it that way. And we made a bet. We went to Israel together. We got married so we could leave together as well. And we got married because we love each other very much and we are in love.
Shut up. Didn't know you. Shut up, Dad.
Yes.
Well, no. Good. Well, good. Parenthesis.
That's great, right? This is part of it, isn't it? It wasn't just a decision like, hey, are we going on a trip? It involved a lot of really deep things, including getting married. As well as selling everything we had, letting go of a lot of things. And well, listening a bit to that desire, right? To suddenly venture into the Middle East without knowing practically anything or very little about it. And well, it was amazing. That adventure, that first moment was incredible.
Of course, because in April, you had a window. I thought you had been much closer to the fateful date, but you were 3, 4, 5 months before the chaos.
In fact, it was like that. From April when I arrived until October, the experience was great. They welcomed me very well there and taught me Hebrew, starting from 0. Or almost 0. Suddenly, I was writing, reading, listening, and speaking Hebrew for 5 months, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day learning Hebrew, plus the day-to-day.
With the technique of comprehensible input, do you know what I'm talking about?
See how it be.
And because there is a whole revolution happening now, a small parenthesis on the topic of Israel in the field of language teaching, we come from the paradigm of repetition, of memorization, of the repetitive algorithm basically to input, plug in vocabulary. So you translate the vocabulary. If the word is cat, then it's gato and so on, which is a direct association between one language and the other and such. And we are, apparently. You have been learning for about 15 or 20 years. Specialists have realized that the way to learn the language is through unconscious acquisition. As they call it, is synonymous with comprehensible input where you focus on learning using the tools of meaning, the message you are conveying, and the context. To give you a concrete illustration of what I'm saying and not go off on a tangent, it's about connecting. In the brain, above all, connecting the word, for example, fire, with a picture of fire. Then your brain connects that picture of fire with the word fire in Spanish. Visual education is being heavily emphasized, so you learn through that connection between the term, this is vocabulary, then there's the structure and so on, but the term, and.
Yes. In this case, the teaching was completely experiential. I mean, not taking what you say, pure experience.
Of course, be there chatting with people.
Yes. It wasn't the Duolingo method of translating words, no. In fact, well, the Mora, who was the teacher, taught us in Hebrew from day one. So, contextually, you were understanding more as the days went by, obviously. Of course, the context and the particular thing. And that's where we started to mix the topics, is that I was with my partner in the room and all my colleagues were Russians, from Russia, all exiles from their war.
I was going to ask you why Russians, as they were escaping from
People my age, 20s, 30s.
Fed up with the topic of.
More than just fed up, they had no other choice. In fact, I've heard apocalyptic stories straight out of movies. About leaving Russia, there were 7 blocks of cars lined up and people walking toward the border. It's like a zombie movie with massive migrations and all that. And those will be my companions, right?
Throw me another parenthesis, give me the profile, what type, because, say, the little soldier from Russia who goes to the border with Ukraine, who are from the interior, from the Russian Midwest, these guys, were they kids from Moscow, from St. Petersburg, were they kids from the interior?
There was a lot of mix. Most were from Moscow. There were some from St. Petersburg, some from Belarus, and some from Ukraine.
But
in the same class, there were kids from Ukraine and Russia, and everything was fine among them. Because, well, none of them, everyone there was losing, right? They were victims of the war. Ah! Well, that was very interesting too, right, living with all of that. Ah! Well, suddenly Hebrew was our common ground, it was our way of understanding each other, some, in English too.
They were struggling with English, but the idea was that they tried to speak as much as possible.
Yes, yes, yes. So, it was fun too, because you had a good time, you know? Yes, it's good. The truth is, fortunately, we approached it from that angle. It was a very nice experience. Well, little by little we were getting into society. You would go to the supermarket and understand what was being said. Hebrew, particularly, I enjoyed learning it. It's very interesting. It has a kind of logic. There is a lot of talk about the Yorish. The Yorish is the root of the word. You have a word with 2 or 3 letters.
The etymology, let's say, of how it is constructed.
Of course, and those 3 letters, which are the root, give rise to a group of words that are more or less related. So it becomes like a game. If Adonai is red, and Adonai is man, red comes from the blood that is red, man.
Ah, it's associative.
Associative, visual, and it's like the language starts to open up for you. It's like it becomes clearer, right? Everything that is dark and unknown starts to be discovered. Like in Age of Empires, you locate the little map that you were. No, the little map, that keeps unfolding. Very interesting. The metaphor is good. Well, it was the same with day-to-day life. You understood the supermarket, you understood what they were saying. I started working in Hebrew, okay? Suddenly, we were settled, I was working. I had gotten a job at a geology company, okay? Everything was in Hebrew, very challenging, very frustrating too. Was it remote or did you go to the office? Well, no, neither remote nor office, it was. In the field, it was doing work of. They were conducting a soil study because they were building a subway. So, I had to go to the drilling site, conduct the soil study, and so on. And the company, just look at what the context is and how different the conditions are, right? From each country, he gave me a car, pays for the gas. And well, I was going to Tel Aviv. I was in Haifa, further north.
Haifa further north, right.
I went to Tel Aviv every day and, well, they paid me for all that, right, plus the salary. As a junior who, not speaking the language,
Does not speak language.
But
your job was to take measurements, not really.
it wasn't talked about much, but you have to understand and make yourself understood. Well, suddenly we were like on the crest of the wave, you know. I mean, we said, hey, let's bet on this, things are going well for us. We're renting 3 blocks from the Mediterranean. Our money is holding up. We're doing great. We're fine by this point. It's already October of last year.
Sure.
October 7th, Saturday, October 7th.
I'm anxious.
In the morning, we woke up with a mate. We had come from a barbecue on Friday night, and we started checking Instagram and messages that were coming in from groups or acquaintances. Guys, be careful because there was trouble in the south, which is common there. It's not something that happens every day.
But it is something recurring.
So you say, well, okay, it happened again. No, it was getting gayer and gayer. You were watching videos, well, all the images that everyone saw around the world. And until we grasped the magnitude of what was really happening, they told you, well, don't open the door even if they say it's the police. There are terrorists who have infiltrated the entire country. Paranoia.
Pause there and finish that, mate, because I'm experiencing music withdrawal. Also, I want to hear you making that little sound with the mate while I listen to you.
Right.
Come on, 4.
From being there on the edge of the leaf to being, suddenly it was like COVID. Locked inside the house, not knowing what was really happening, how long we had to stay there, and watching the news, right. And each time, the news got darker. 3 days went by without us leaving the house, watching the news that also eats away at your mind, until my partner starts telling me, let's go, let's go, let's go.
I remember you are.
Sure, and I'm kind of in the position of, well, let's see how it goes, because, we have everything here. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to? Right.
Besides, disbelief, I mean. Wait, let me ask you, the shock of learning the numbers of the victims and the scale of the conflict. Was that a matter of hours or a couple of days? Or Did the awareness of the magnitude of the mess last a little longer? Especially as protagonists, right, because for those of us consuming the news from a distance, it's different. The rhythms are different. Have you all heard about how tremendous it was the next day? Were you already aware of that, or was it like things were escalating?
Yes, it escalated, and I believe the effects of that are still felt today. Well, in fact, the war continues. I left and escaped, but over there, the chaos is still ongoing. But I think that in those 3 days that passed, it was like saying, I am really understanding what is happening, where I am suddenly in Israel, I am in the Middle East. It's just the two of us together but alone, and everyone here is crazy. They are all out of their minds and they want to kill each other. That was like my point of view, right? This depends on who you ask. No, it's perfect. And in this, well, let's go. And I say to him, you know what? You're right. What are we going to keep waiting for? Not being able to leave. Because suddenly the fear was, well, the country closed, no one can leave.
Yes.
And that's how it was. I think it was the hardest decision of my life. The decision to say, let's grab a carry-on backpack, that very one.
Show it to her, show it to the people.
But, wow.
This is a historical document.
There to the camera.
It's an inconsequential backpack, but it's the backpack that I escaped with.
We grabbed a couple of things. It was over there. It was in summer, but well, in spring, I don't remember. Well, we headed to the airport. Well, all this trying to get tickets, flights online, everything is down, impossible. All right, let's go to the airport and see what we can do. That decision. It was a matter of life or death, literally, and I had never experienced in my life saying, I don't know what is safer, staying inside the house or going to the train and heading to the airport, because I didn't know if a bomb would drop. Of course. Well, it was very much like that, you know. Well, that's when my intuition kicks in, saying, okay, I don't have the answer. I don't have it. I don't know it. What do I sense? What does my body tell me? It tells me to leave. Let's listen to it. We left all of this notifying everyone we know. It's 2 in the afternoon. We're taking the train to the airport. I'm letting you know because I don't know what might happen. You see, taking precautions.
I remember, let me make another aside. I remember that I was part of that communication and I told you. I remember the exact words. I said, man, you owe them nothing. Because of what?
I interpreted, and I remember you saying you're good, but I came here to build a homeland. And I say, man, you owe nothing to Israel. I mean, just take off and leave. That was what I told you. It's not that I'm correcting you, but there's something I don't identify with. I didn't go to build a homeland in Israel. I went to gain experience, to want to grow, to grow and have better opportunities. But I wasn't rooted in Israel like many people who have been there for many years and are more battle-hardened and defend it, saying, I'm not leaving here. I said my priority is my family, it's life. I saw it as life or death, it's life, and here I am. Smelling death. It's very crazy, but those are things I felt and thought that way. Well, we went to the airport, and this is where the title I brought you about the transpersonal journey in Israel and a transpersonal journey comes in. Israel and a transpersonal journey.
That is going to be the title of this chapter.
Because we arrived at the airport full of people. Nothing was working. The cards weren't working. Well, everything was collapsed. And a Mexican we met there tells us, "The guys, take the first flight you find to anywhere because the airport closes tomorrow."
Sure, to hell.
Imagine. Well, we spent 14 hours at the airport trying to get a flight.
On standby.
Yeah, did you see? Searching. A cousin of my partner ended up getting us a flight to Istanbul. He's in Argentina. I was saying, I can't believe it. Damn it.
Well, but some friend of yours, some nerd to help you with those things.
Yes. No. Well, when I arrived, I even got a spectacular ticket, super cheap, and really comfortable. When the ticket arrived, I said, "It saved my life." I swear, I remember calling him and saying thank you because today I see it as if you were talking to me about life. Maybe it wasn't exactly like that, but in my head, it doesn't matter. You have to be there playing these things. I take it literally because it's the feeling you had. Yes, totally. And well, we went to Istanbul completely shocked. And the next day I remember we booked the first room we found, and at 5 in the morning I clearly heard the sound, in Arabic. I got up in Istanbul and said, "What happened? Where am I?" WTF. I swear I didn't understand what had happened there. Where was I? When I went out to the street, there were mosques everywhere, and well, that's where an adventure began. Because how long were we in Istanbul? We were in Istanbul for a week. Then they made some transition. Yeah, also, it was. I don't know how much time. I left the dirty dishes in Israel. Literally, the dirty dishes were there. All my clothes are there. My computer is there. My work is there.
Is computer too.
I didn't inform my boss that I was leaving. I just left. Yes, the computer. But to this day, he still doesn't know that you left. No, yes. At that moment, well, Istanbul for a week. To relax, to get away from the chaos. Istanbul wasn't the best place either, No, but with Ergedin. These Turks are terrible. No, still the best. With the Turks, and we were Argentinians. Nothing about Israel, nothing about Hebrew. We are Argentinians, Messi, Maradona, to defend the death.
I had a girlfriend in London. I had a Turkish girlfriend, Aslam, who taught me to say Maraba diola. I think it's Maraba.
I don't know.
And keypack. Keypack is the belly button. But I'm not going to provide context for why I know that word. I think it's obvious. Anyway, jokes aside, so you were in Istanbul, first week.
First week, and well, it turns out that a support network was formed in Spain for people who were escaping from Israel, and they were hosting us for free in their homes. People from the Jewish community who hosted us. And well, we ended up at the house of a couple of super grateful people who hosted us.
Do you want to name them?
Yes, because they appear to him.
Then you send him the link so he can see it.
Bernardo, Nathan, guys from Peru, A blast.
Thanks, Bernardo.
Friends from Peru who hosted us in their apartment. Who else? They are going to kill me. Well, a couple of Venezuelans too, near Valencia. And the aunt, I don't remember her name, I'm nervous, sorry. And the aunt who also hosted us with the crescent.
It's not gonna work out for you. Well, just slide.
Where does the transpersonal journey come from? There came a moment when I said, I am doing the same thing that my great-great-grandparents and great-grandparents did 100 years ago, leaving. Overnight with a suitcase. Maybe, from Eastern Europe to America. Or, from Europe to know that adventure and say, crazy, 100 years later I'm doing the same thing in a different context, but very similar, and that blew my mind, right. How cycles repeat, the return to the return. Right.
We can play a little with that concept, but I don't want you to finish. I want you to finish rounding off or telling this parable.
All right.
Total freedom.
Well, finally after being in Spain for 3 weeks trying to get papers, but it was impossible because the situation with immigrants there was very oversaturated, right. We wanted to see if, as war refugees, we could find some paperwork and stay for a while. Is it a legitimate label? Yes, but since the war was very recent, let's say, they didn't pay us any attention. We bounced around a lot of police stations, but we traveled through many towns in Spain, so it was good. Well, we finally returned to Israel.
Yes, that is the part one was holding back to ask you, but then I went back to Israel.
Turned to Israel.
In a context somewhere. Tell us in what context, how the decision was made, and what happened.
That decision was very difficult. We didn't know what to do. Nico every day in Spain was a tidal wave of thoughts about what we should do, whether to stay here, doing what, or go back to Argentina. But I just left. Should I return to Israel? But there's a war, my things are there, fragmented into 3 or 4 parts at the same time. Well, we had to make a decision, Talking to friends who were in Israel, they told us, guys, day-to-day here is actually quite normal. If they want to come back, they can come back. And then we said, well, let's go back. We gathered all our things, closed everything we needed to close, and we left. And that's what we did. We returned and spent 3 more months in Israel with new jobs. I resigned there because I didn't want to travel every day because it was dangerous. And we worked together in a hotel that was 5 blocks away, which became our second home. Really cool people. It was like our big family.
I love it. I can imagine the movie, that hotel movie.
No, yes, really.
An Israeli sitcom.
And look how crazy it is in Israel. Because my colleagues, I had Russian colleagues, I had Arab colleagues, and I had Israeli colleagues working. I don't know if many people know this, but in Israel, Arabs coexist with Israelis, Russians, Latinos, and others. But it's not that all the Arabs are outside.
Exactly.
Israeli, Arab.
This is an opportunity for you, from your perspective, to break myths and misconceptions. I also invited you for this reason, to educate us a bit about the things we think we know.
Yes, I don't know if I should educate them, but I'm going to tell you what I saw and what I experienced. What I experienced was that in Israel, all the street signs are in 3 languages: Hebrew, Arabic, English. A lot of Russian lately. The Israelis are pragmatic since there are many Russians. In fact, they are the same Russians who are colonizing. Yes, but literally, they are forming colonies of Russians, like what is happening a bit here in the micro center, where suddenly there are Russians everywhere. I come from Vicente Lopez, and my daughter has Russian friends all over the plaza, of course, the nephew too. Yes, so they coexist. It's very crazy. But wait, if they are at war and you are telling me they coexist, there is a lot of mixing, a lot of things happen at the same time there. And the intensity. There, I lived intensity. I mean, there are discussions, there are cafe fights between each other. What kind of intensity are you referring to? It's very difficult to describe because I think you have to be there to understand it. But there, I felt, or I was breathing, a tense calm. I call it right. Okay. It's like everything is fine. You walk down the street with your phone, and no one is going to rob you. Nothing is going to happen. But then, all of a sudden, everything explodes. Of course. And it has a way of being, its culture, right. Its way of, its social practices are very vigorous when it comes to talking, And they shout. Yes, it doesn't mean that they want to fight, but they shout, and we are not used to that. We are more Latino, more empathetic. There's our Tano side, our loud Tano side, but it's a louder kind of joy, more of a celebration, I don't know. And a bit of the intensity comes from that side, and it also comes from the fact that they are very pragmatic. Do you want to start working? Start. No bureaucracy. Come on. Start signing the papers and you're already working. It's like you feel there's a social mechanism that moves forward. That's crazy too.
It is assumed, from what we understand, about Israel, especially around Tel Aviv, you can correct me or refine the point, that it is an ecosystem of a lot of entrepreneurship. There is a lot of discussion about innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. Is this the case? Is the result, according to what you think, a product of their original culture? Or is it, as I would say, a layer that is placed on top of the traditions and something that could even contrast with the traditional aspects there?
Also, the two things coexist. It's part of it because I believe it's part of their context, right? Also, if they don't innovate, if they aren't at the forefront of technology, they get eaten alive. Literally, and it's already part of their essence. I don't think they even realize it. No, yes, they pose it to themselves and challenge each other continuously, but they also do it because they need to.
Think that we come from, probably, the country. In this sense, It is more contrasting with Israel, because Argentina, first of all, I was going to say that it only shares a border with Chile, but no, there is also one above, but here. As I told Milagros, we have a history of conflict and such, but much less so, and in day-to-day life. There is no threat of bombs here. You see, in contrast, in Israel, it must be one of the countries where, well, one of the countries with the most, there will be a couple of Africans and others, well, now in Ukraine, but let's say. That contrast is exacerbated by the chaos with Hamas and such from this latest wave. To you, let's say, well, that's what you're telling me, right? So, this created a kind of discomfort for you or this. Tinscom. You called it Tinscom, right?
Yes, Tinscom, yes. Tinscom, yes. Let's see, that happened to me, right? In the first week I arrived in Israel, the thought of inflation disappeared from my mind. And that's pretty crazy too.
Crazy.
From the insecurity on the street.
And about the insecurity on the street.
Nothing. Suddenly it wasn't a recurring thought like it might be here. But other things happen there that don't happen here. Like you said, there is no war here. I believe there is neither better nor worse. It's very difficult to compare it as well because it's unfair. I would say,
they are like us, meaning we are generalizing, in the sense of being friendly and quickly including you, inviting you to barbecues or the equivalent over there. Because of my experience with Israelis that I had, let me make a quick aside. In '96, when I traveled at the age of 18, on my first backpacking trip of more than 6 months, I went to Australia, which was full of Israelis. I don't know if it is the same now, but back then, there were a lot of Israelis in Australia. I loved it. I didn't understand what they were saying, but their body language is very similar to ours. You know, about touching each other, about hugging, at the two, the only ones are more, colder, more distant. There's a lot of, and this shouting and such, which we also have, but sometimes it's a shouting. You see, some Eastern cultures seem to be falling apart, or even the Germans, right? And actually, no, they're talking, so the volume of the voice, or the cut, of the language, which might be languages, the J in Arabic languages, and such. I don't remember, I don't know where I came with, the parenthesis of course, because they are. Let's say, do they have that friendly vibe?
they are open. They are broths.
The Greeks too.
Well, there is a let me see if it's like this. They are called sabra. I think the word is sabra. To the natives of Israel, right? And the sabra is a fruit from there, from Israel. That is prickly. Is that the right way to say it? Prickly. It is prickly. On the outside. But once you open it, it is meaty, juicy, and sweet. It is a metaphor for the personality of an Israeli and tough-skinned because they live surrounded by enemies. However, if you gain their trust, they also make sense. And you know that particularly with Argentinians, they have a great vibe towards us. They hold us in high regard, and I believe it's partly because we know how to navigate and solve problems, and largely due to Chris Morena, who is a sensation there. In fact, like Orairo is a sensation in Russia, many girls, especially, know Spanish because of Rebelled Way and Cassie Angeles, which is really crazy, incredible. So to wrap up, or to continue, to wrap up, I would like to tell you what I have here today. What do I take away from that experience nowadays? Sure, I feel it in my day-to-day life and in the things I've been doing here and many projects, jobs. I'm filled with a lot of creative energy. Good. It's like a phrase I keep repeating, and yes, I live it that way. I believe that, to a large extent, somehow, I don't know how, I have integrated the East with the West. I feel that. Totally, man. I feel that a little. I can't find the explanation for it, but I feel it. And this intensity, one was telling you about. I'm 32 years old. I turn 32 tomorrow.
Well.
I am at a point of channeling my energy and stopping wasting time.
It's okay.
And we are going all in.
A good reading of the moment in your life that you're in. I celebrate it.
here we are.
Look, you opened up to me because, well, this idea of integrating East with West resonates with me because the audience is also getting to know me almost at the same time as you. I was living in India throughout 2016, as you know. I was in India and spent a couple of months in Thailand and a month in Myanmar. But more than anything in India, I was working in India, traveling around, and the goal with which my Argentine friend, Sebas Villarino, and I went was that later he had to return earlier than expected, which is why we couldn't do the Silk Road, which is what we wanted to do. We went to India, my friend Sebas, a great artist, a great photographer. I mean, the guy works for UNESCO, for National Geographic. He's amazing. This was the 5th time I was going to India. I had been everywhere, Southeast Asia, Mongolia, China, and with me was the 3rd attempt he had to travel the Silk Road from China, let's say, China, Mongolia, through there, to Turkey, overland. We spent an entire year, 2015, preparing for that trip, analyzing the borders. I remember we had a map at his uncle's house, where he lived, and I would spend 4 nights a week with him. We had a giant wall with maps attached to complete everything that is Eurasia. And we had marked it with color codes, just like the book, red, green, and yellow, with green being an easy border, yellow a complicated border, and red meaning I didn't go through there. We had everything planned out, and we had said, well, we have several alternatives, but we were already memorizing the 5 or 6 countries: Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and all those that I'm missing a couple more: Armenia, Pin, Mongolia, of course. Well, that got frustrated. He got frustrated. Sebas left 2 months after we started, but I stayed there for a year. Our goal was to call ourselves Miracle Hunters. He was going to be the photographer, and I was going to be the writer, the editor of articles for magazines. Just think about that analogical thinking. 2015, we were going to write articles for magazines. He had been coming along, and I also work. I have been collaborating with magazines for many years. We were also thinking about the digital aspect, but I mean, this somewhat old school issue of publishing articles in magazines, chasing miracles. The slogan was to celebrate cultures on the verge of extinction, or at least that was the premise, right? Cultures on the verge of extinction. We didn't do the Silk Road. Sebas returned early, but I stayed, and what I did was celebrate. Cultures, supposedly on the verge of extinction. There's a nice clarification here. In India, then in Burma, and not so much in Thailand. Thailand is very modernized, very organized. It's like a sort of South Africa meets Eastern Australia. Of course, it is a second world country, so to speak, or a first world one. But Myanmar is the Cuba of Asia, just like Laos. Laos and Myanmar are like the Cuba of Asia. And India is the fucking India. I mean, India is like another planet. Even the other Asians say, wow, how strange India is. I mean, it's impressive. So this feeling, I return to the topic, this feeling of, in my mind, amalgamating, harmonizing. It's fine. I am 46 years old. I spent 45 years in the West and 1 in the East, with a lot of humility in what I say, but well, a year is a year. You too. There are many things that are universal. In human beings, there are essences that are human for everyone, and common sense and such. But there they are. They are like mantras. There are historical structures of thought, of how to live life, of how to perceive reality that are different. Even so, of course, within each pole, within each hemisphere, but also what I did, and it included me, I have no problem sharing it with everyone. It included a depression. I became almost like the saving the distances, let's say, almost like a post-traumatic experience for those coming from war with a tremendous grief, and also a kind of feeling. I was also 40 years old when I returned, feeling like I was at a crossroads, lost, without a goal. I ran out of ideas until I rebuilt myself, and so on. Then, I became a dad. I wrote this book. This book is the consequence of having transcended that darkness, that labyrinth. How crazy, Nico, if you allow me.
Please what you're saying, right? I still can't find the answer. But, what happened to me? What happened inside me? That suddenly all the projects I had, that I've had for a long time, are now coming to fruition and not before, right? I tell you, partly I think it's because of having integrated what I didn't see, the other part, and you start to connect the dots. There are many things we don't understand, and it's okay not to understand everything and let it happen and enjoy it too. We don't have to understand everything. But I want to mix it with something you mention in the book, which is the mystery of the other, or the mystery of, if you allow me.
Please, find the little box. This is an exercise in improvised conversation, but we have some reviews, tools, or pillars to support us, which is a bit of the idea, right? To introduce the book into the conversation. That's right.
The greatest mystery is the other, says the title, you say. I believe that with that title alone, we can shoot off in 45 different directions, just like we were talking about before. Yes, but let me. Take your time. The thing is, we live in a reality that is too fragmented, compartmentalized, specialized, where the return is no longer perceived as eternal, where the line, the duality, the opposites, the conflict with the other reigns between men and women. Great. I think you present a paradigm there, a situation of how we are seeing the world today, right? And we are talking about a different way of understanding it, or how we understand it.
The journey we are going through, right? That excursion into the unknown, which I metaphorically define as the title of the book, Metanoia, Beyond the Mind, brings us back to your point. An excursion into the unknown that's a bit what we are discussing, right? In that turnaround, right? In any case, with some guidance, with some insights, getting to know you better, and getting to know a bit more about the world and trying to incorporate it, integrate it, etc. But I don't want to. I've already interrupted you too much.
No, and basically that's it. Like the mystery is the other, and when one dares, especially, to get to know the other, but in this case, another culture, other paradigms different from our own, with which we were born and raised. Well, you see other ways, right? And I think that, tying it a bit to what I heard in the previous chapter, this idea of neuroplasticity, opening new channels, thinking in different ways. They were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, but recognition was the term they used.
Cognitive reevaluation.
Thought review.
I want to tell you another story about what is happening, Hal, to reframe the narrative.
Well, excellent. I understand that in my ontological language, which I gained from ontological coaching training, it is nothing more than a way of expressing things. It is the change of observer. A shift in perspective occurs. What I used to see from one side, I now see from another side. So, I see it differently. And I'll give you a concrete example. I left for Argentina tired, complaining a lot about certain things. I returned to Argentina now, and I am happy with life, with my country, with everything we have, and I appreciate a lot of things that I didn't value before.
Yes, let's see. Advice to the people and the clergy. If you want to love your country, go away for a while and come back. At least, I don't know if this happens with other countries, but it's what has happened to me on several trips. Regarding what you're saying, I experienced the same thing. It's impressive, and we can talk a lot about it.
And it is one example out of 1,000 that we can find about how we can change our perspective.
Exactly.
Why? Why would we do it? And perhaps so that life is more bearable, I think, right? They also talked about this idea of playing, of the playful.
Yes.
To see. Opportunities where perhaps there were once obligations. I'm not saying I don't have obligations, but I take it differently. Nowadays, I am working at a company, and I used to think that working at a company meant sitting in a chair, in front of a computer, and being there like a slave. Today, I see it as a game. Why? Because I am in relation with other people. I create opportunities with my colleagues. We go this way. We go that way. I have coordinators, but I also know that they are people like me. So, I will tell you what I think. I will listen to what you say, and it's not wrong to not take anything too seriously or too personally. One starts to ask, what is wisdom?
But one becomes a little wiser with this experience. You have returned. To go back to this transpersonal journey and the prolific nature of capital, let's say, of what you are taking advantage of the pieces that are falling into place now, right? Enjoy more. Remember that that other person, who is a mystery, is still someone with their own fears and their own insecurities. Enjoying uncertainty more, enjoying conflict more even, not the kind of conflict that involves fighting, but rather the difference, the diversity.
Yes, I believe it goes a lot in that direction. And perhaps we can land on another concept that you touch upon, which is that of aggregation, that of integration. What is that? It is integrating the diverse to form something new that did not exist before.
Absolutely, I'll keep it brief because I'm also interested in making the distinction. One, of the theses of the book is that we come from postmodernity and postmodernity, which is this kind of patina of disappointment in the face of reality, or how we narrated reality in the modern era, is related to cynicism or even nihilism, like a kind of cyberpunk. The theme is, well, in the end, this is crap, and I don't really know where to run. So let's indulge in our own negative aspects. I'm exaggerating. Postmodernism gives itself a license to do anything. I remember that postmodernism actually started much earlier than 2000. But in 2000, we had a whole reaction to postmodernism that was, well, hold on. Let's make this a little brighter. Let's start fusing. Do you remember the time of fusion food, fusion cuisine, when we fused musical styles, fused them, and it became trendy? You might have been younger, but I was in my 20s when the 2000s started, the first 10 years of the 2000s fusion. So what happens? For me, integration is a concept that has been around for 25 years, or however you want to see it, 15 years, and integration is a developmental modality of fusion. To fuse is to mix. Let's mix, let's add. Integration is like a step. It's the next step. It's not just about mixing, but about arranging the pieces in a new configuration. Do. Generate something new. Do you know how I see it?
What you are telling me, and I feel it. I see it as a big locro, a big stew. It's about putting different elements together. How do you say it? Spices, and let them come together and cook. Stirring. To create a new flavor that wasn't there before. What is? Beyond. The union of the parts is what emerges from it, the new.
Exactly, and then the other point, which is also related to the premise of the book, and that we are going to have fun with what follows, is the topic of integration as an attitude, whose foundation is systemic and holistic thinking, a collaborative attitude, long-term awareness, and a commitment to, above all, I would say the underlying theme is systemic thinking. Understanding reality not as causal, cause and effect, linear, binary, but as a node of relationships, as a network of relationships where we are nodes in that network, where the human being, the idea, what is manifested is a knot of energy, let's say, that is connected, hyper-connected, well, the neural network, the universe itself, the mycelium, are all metaphors for this, right?
But you know what? I think that what we are doing right now is something systemic and constructivist, right? Because It has to do with the nodes, as you say, like perhaps today you and I are here in this temple of a studio. I like to say the same. It's a temple. I see it that way. When you enter a cathedral, we become liturgical. It's a sanctuary. That's what it is, a sanctuary. And well, we are the nodes, but there is also the relationship. And I think that is the importance of thinking and being attentive to how we relate to each other. Because it could be that I came here and sat down to tell you everything I did in my life and not listen to you, or the other way around. Yes, we are relating to each other, but we are not building anything. Exactly. And I believe that we are present in how we want to relate to each other and what we want to achieve. And well, this conversation is emerging, right? This discussion.
The goal is somewhat similar to the objective of the book, which is to present the concept of integration from many angles and to promote it. This podcast has the same goal or vision or desire that we have, to create the conditions for the conversation to take place. And we need to define conversation. Well, it's a construction. How did you say constructivist? I mean, it's a constructivist dynamic where two or more individuals, in this case two, you and I, are freely associating ideas in the attitude of building something that transcends both of us, so to speak.
I ask you.
And to have a good time and share a little laughter. Also, of course, but let's say in the background there is that issue, right? Of construction, yes.
I mean, right. It's like if we look at it from the outside and I ask, whose interview is this? Is it yours? Is it mine?
No, of course also.
It is no longer even ours.
No, it's an interview. Well, I might be mistaken, but
Expanding the system, those who listen to us, because this is made for people to hear us, will be part of the system we are creating now. Because when they listen, they will be going through their own process.
Jacqueline.
And they will be sharing it with other people. Well,
And they will be able to. The production team is letting us know that there are 10 minutes left.
Sure.
And you'll be able to. We have 10 minutes left. And you'll also be able to comment, and we can scold each other and celebrate or whatever. Right? And to add to the conversation, because that is also the magic of, well, the channels. I don't know if we are still going to. Yes, Spotify and YouTube, and whatever else I'll pass it to you, I'll remind you it might be a little late for. I think I've already told you that this is going to Spotify, so it's not just audio-visual, it's also audio. Beautiful. Anyway, Nico, we have 10 minutes left. Yes, do you think that? Yes, but you wanted to wrap up. I wanna.
let me.
Yes, of course, no. I mean to close this topic and move on to the next one.
Come on, let's go move forward.
Come on, come on.
Next step. I go back to what you mentioned about intuition, but I remember a phrase that said or says something like intuition is that which you don't know you know, but you know you know. Sorry, I'll say it again. You don't know how you know, but you know you know. Well, by definition, you don't know how you know, but you know you know. I think it's like information that comes from the gut that doesn't go through the brain so much. It's more reptilian, more intuitive, precisely.
Artistic appreciation, for example, is based on intuition. In other words, you don't have to know that Picasso was a cubist and what his influences were. You see the painting, you either like it or you don't, and you don't really know why you like this painting and not so much the one next to it. But you like it. You know you like music. I mean, art in general resonates with you. Exactly? Well, there it is. Yes. Yes, I feel identified with that definition. Good. That's great. And now that you feel identified, I'm going to interview you. Okay. In the final stretch of the podcast.
Does that sound good to you? Yes, sir. Because, well, we mention this intuition as, you say, a magical intuition. And here we arrive at a point that I wanted to reach. This fascinated me. And I want to ask you about this. You talk about dancing on water. I'm going to read a little so that they understand us. He says, it might be worth clarifying the subjectivity of my next statement, but once said, I will say it, the highest expression of the integration between science, which is technique, art, which is dance and sport, which is training, is surfing. It says, they only find the point where the energy of the wave that travels through the water, catches the board in its path. And after feeling one with that energy, it is a mystical moment. It creates small nirvanas trying to stand still and stay there for a while, which demigod is living those seconds in a timeless dimension, ensuring the activation of neuroplasticity, the creation of new tissues and connections, and the transcendence of any trauma through play, laughter, and love.
What a truly remarkable quote indeed.
Yes, because I hit play. Tell me, do you want me to go in a specific direction first? It seems to me that it summarizes everything we've been talking about at some point, and it happened to me when I read these lines that you wrote here, something very personal of yours. I mean, the book is yours, but here you wrote, as if you extracted something, an essence, a concentrate.
Noticeable, noticeable.
And I would love to be able to double-click on this.
Well, yes, it is indeed very personal. It's kind of crazy because I'm from Buenos Aires, right? I'm from Buenos Aires. Surfer from Buenos Aires is kind of an oxymoron. Surfing in Buenos Aires doesn't make much sense. Well, historically, I was educated in Australia in '96. I surfed for about 6 months when I was just 18 years old. And fortunately, later I had the privilege of surfing at other beaches. The place I call my backyard in the beautiful country of Argentina is Mar del Plata, and my uncles are surfers. My aunt is the first Argentine female surfer, which means I come from a long line of passionate surfers. That thing about dancing on the water is a secret quote I make to a fisherman. I'll tell you quickly because later we'll go into detail, but I was in the Bay of Bengal 2016, working for a festival and surf tournament, the India Surf Festival, which is the first surf tournament in the history of India. And I participated in the 5th edition as the production chief and such, and everyone was there, but since I was one of the few surfers, surfing is still a very nascent sport in India. Even though it has a lot of coastlines and is a fantastic place to surf, there are very few swimmers, very few people in India who surf and know how to swim. But well, I was there and I was surfing. I got out of the water and a fisherman says to me, "You all?" I realized that he was getting to know the sport that day with us. We were training before the tournament itself and such. I was a judge for the tournament. No. I'm a big guy. I was a judge. The kids, but well, they included me with the kids. They were with the camera and such. And the guy says, "It looks like they are dancing on water," and that made me. Later I found out that Timothy Leary, who is a famous psychologist from Harvard, was the one who popularized LSD outside of the institution, beyond what is scientific research. He gave it to young students at the university, and that's how the hippie movement was generated and so on. Timothy says something like that in the most concentrated manifestation of the cosmic dance. I don't know how much it is for us humans. It's surfing. Obviously, one can feel this in a lot of sports. Americans call it being in the zone. It's about being in a trance and such. The basketball player who is about to, you see that he is, and he makes a three-pointer from 10 meters, 15, and the basket. At that moment, there are many ways to think. Do you want to? Yeah, go ahead, interrupt me.
I want to ask you, don't you think that we are surfing here today?
Yes, without a doubt. And surfing includes, first of all, arriving at the beach. Second, checking things out. Another thing I loved, I heard it from a legendary surfer from Hawaii. He says, if you look at it, there is no sport, unless it's surfing, where the athlete goes and before practicing the sport, checks the tennis court. No, but when you arrive at the beach, you check the waves. You spend a good while checking the waves first quietly and still. This is, I'm creating a ritual. Then you start stretching. Then you put on your wetsuit if the water is cold. but you are already preparing mentally. There is a descent, there is active meditation. Stretching. You are checking where you want to go. You look at where the rip currents are, where the water takes you out, where the water pulls you in, where the rocks are. You talk to people, the locals, whatever it is, you get in. You have to filter, and that's where most people fail, most of those who want to learn to surf. You have to get past the break. You have to get through the waves. And it was only then that I remember the first 2 days of my self-taught surfing lessons with the surfers who were there. When I bought my first little board in Australia, the first 2 days, I focused on learning how to sit on the board to wait for the wave. You see, you sit on the board, and there you are, almost in a beautiful meditative state. And then, well, then you have to turn around and take charge, right? To braze. And I don't know how much in that pingue, and to capture that energy that the wave brings. Because that's a wonderful thing. The wave is not the water. The water is like this, and the wave passes, and the water goes up and down, and the wave has passed, you see. You know it. It's like synapse. It's like the electric pulse of the synapse, the axon. The axon is there, and the pulse passes through, and excites the axon until the wave goes away. Here, the closest waves. On a human scale, more. The closest thing we have is water, the sea. That is our wave. You have radio waves, light waves, waves of I don't know what, electromagnetism. Our waves are the waves of the ocean, right? Well, yes. I don't remember what the question was. Yes, what we are doing, of course, because in a conversation, you aren't in the zone all the time. What does it mean to be in the zone or in a trance? Well, when you finally catch that energy, the energy starts to push your board and yourself, and then you stand up. There are moments when you enter the tube, or you do a trick, or whatever it may be, but just standing up, especially for someone doing it for the first time, that feeling even with a buggy, lying on the board, being pushed by the wave, the feeling that you have joined that energy, those are little nirvanas. And that's why I fervently recommend all of you to practice, even if it turns out poorly. It doesn't matter, it's difficult, it's a tough sport. I'll close with this. I found out the other day that very successful programs for treating post-traumatic stress disorder are being developed. In the United States first and now everywhere, with military personnel, with people from
Natural disasters and whatnot with a surfing learning program is impressive. It's crazy because I was listening to you, and let's say, it remains a practice if we want to see it that way, which perhaps allows you to break away from the ego of feeling part of something bigger than yourself. It's not just you when you get into the wave and the sea. You stop being just you to become part of a larger whole.
Yes.
And I believe that there, the traumas and the things that happen to us humans diminish. They dissolve.
A day spent surfing is a day well spent. In other words, it happened to me while painting murals. It happened to me while painting murals. It happened to me. For me, there are others who go out to play volleyball, and that's because it's that, right? It's dopamine. I go out for a run. I also feel very satisfied after going for a run. Now, dancing on a wave, that is on a human scale. After, let's say, and nothing more and nothing less than in the context of the ocean. In other words, you are adding color to it. That's why I say mural painting is art. I imagine that someone who trains in ballet or who is a dancer must feel the same way because you are creating. You are moving. Dopamine flows. Everything gets lubricated. You come out of the water shining, man, you come out, even if you surfed for an hour poorly, it doesn't matter. You walk 5 centimeters above the ground and go to sleep. That day could be a failure in your life, whatever you want, your girlfriend left you, whatever you want, but look at what you quickly associate with failure, your girlfriend left you. But well, yes. Surfing is. Me, what am I? I am a father. I am curious, I am observant, I am grateful, and I am a surfer.
I love that we are closing with your presentation. It's an excellent way.
Rico, this is it's my second podcast. How did you feel?
Spectacular. I had a lot of fun and learned a lot.
Well, me too. Well, there it is. That's the point, or that's the horizon of the conversation. To come out a little more with a little more than when you arrived.
Yes, and let me add to your compliments. I agree, you are a great person, a great companion, and I want to thank you for the invitation to be part of this, which is really awesome. Please, let's go with a little hug, a final hug, and then we can wrap it up.
Hi. I could lower this because the piece was noticeable. This was metanoia monomer, the era of integration. To learn more about this cycle and find out what's coming up, subscribe and hit the bell hard. Namaskar. Cheers and good luck.